A lot has been said about John Carpenter's remake of the 1951 Howard Hawks production of The Thing from Another World. Many consider it to be Carpenter's best film, and I am definitely in that camp. Carpenter's version was a lot closer to the original novella titled Who Goes There by John W. Campbell, the 1951 film portraying an alien who was closer to a vegetable than the chameleon-like assimilation machine presented in the novella, and faithfully adapted in Carpenter's film. This sneaky, clever, shape-shifting extraterrestrial is the most striking thing about the film, which was brilliantly and disgustingly realized by the makeup effects artist Rob Bottin. At that time in 1982, The Thing's incredibly inventive and gross creature effects took audiences by surprise and really pissed off a lot of movie reviewers, who eviscerated the film. It got horrible reviews, with many taking issue with Carpenter's audacity to display such repulsive visuals. The world was too caught up in the fantastical magic of Steven Spielberg's E.T. to give The Thing its due. Many critics thought the film was cold, sterile, and nihilistic. Ironically, these are the very things it would become praised for upon a reassessment of the film years later, with many eventually calling it Carpenter's best work, again, me included. But it seriously derailed his career at the time, and he went from being one of the hottest directors to getting fired from the movie Firestarter, which he was set to direct next because of the box office and critical failure of The Thing.
The movie tanked when it came out, by the way. It was hated by fans. I lost a job. People hated me. They thought I was this horrible, violent, and I was.
I saw The Thing as a child and always held it in high regard. It was obviously made by someone who completely understood the material they were working with, that the bleakness was the point. The insanely gross visual effects only worked to heighten the tension in an already tense situation that could blow at any moment. There are so many things that make Carpenter's greatest achievement work as well as they do. For one, it's probably the most single-minded film I've ever seen, totally committed to its bleakness, lack of any moral compass, and nihilistic end-of-the-world tonal construction. It's a film made without compromise. It's no coincidence that the film is set in the most uninhabitable place on Earth, the Antarctic. It's the perfect backdrop for a story like this, where the term survival of the fittest has never been more appropriate. The bone-chilling cold and desolate landscape only serve to exacerbate what becomes an ever-increasingly scary and hopeless experience. A byproduct of all this despair is a palpable sense of paranoia that infects the outpost like the viral threat of the thing itself. In constructing the film, Carpenter takes his time, carefully creating an atmosphere of dread and unease in which this paranoia easily begins to slowly take hold over the characters and the audience. There is an existentialism to this paranoia that reaches into something very real in modern society. The idea of not being able to know the true nature of a person, their deepest, most inner selves, and their potential to bring you harm. And the creature itself can take on such a disgusting appearance, the audience is dreading who might transform next. In the summer of 1982, it was easy to see why critics and audiences reacted with such disdain for Carpenter's masterpiece. E.T. was working its way through teary-eyed audiences all over the world, grossing at that point an absolutely unheard of $663 million. To put that in perspective, that would equate to nearly $2.5 billion in today's currency. There was no way The Thing could compete with a movie that had such a profound emotional effect on audiences. The cute, cuddly, and altruistic alien in E.T. was the antithesis of the cold, disgusting, remorseless creation in Carpenter's film. Where Spielberg's film was warm, hopeful, and inspiring, Carpenter's was dark, depressing, and scary. E.T. was the perfect outlet for audiences who had grown tired of the cultural upheavals of the past 2 decades and wanted something that could touch their hearts rather than churn their stomachs. Carpenter's film was a case of a movie that was just too far ahead of its time. It was a precursor to a world post 9/11 that was becoming increasingly smaller through the wide reach of the internet, bringing people closer together, much like the men stuck in the outpost in The Thing, but also creating an atmosphere of mistrust and betrayal through anonymity. The men in The Thing all look and sound normal, just like those online who seem like normal people, but you never know who you're really communicating with. And the age of cancel culture in which people could no longer make a mistake without it following them for life, and in many cases destroying their lives, causing everyone to walk on virtual eggshells for fear of offending someone. Paranoia, mistrust, and bleakness has become the de facto atmosphere of online culture. In this way, Carpenter's film was a subtle predictor of this insane future we find ourselves in, like some dystopian prism of psychic terrorism. And even the notion of assimilation is interesting as it relates to current events. In The Thing, the creature imitates anything it comes into contact with, absorbing them into its mass collective and imitating everything about the individual that was there before. Only the original is copied over and no longer remains. In this current age, we have people being assimilated into ideas and movements, with the whole taking over the person's entire thought process in many cases. And since people often identify with their beliefs rather than viewing them as just an opinion, you have a recipe for mass assimilations into many large thing-like groups, undulating, moving, absorbing more and more bodies for its cause. The all-male cast was another thing that was easy to take shots at, but it's just another layer of the film's purity, in the sense that gender politics had no place in a story like this. While you could argue that women don't necessarily bring divisiveness to a majority male group, and shouldn't complicate things, for the type of men the film portrays, this is a ludicrous notion. You have pot-smoking, drinking, testosterone-fueled, lonely men completely cut off from society. These aren't all scientists. Putting women in a situation like this would create an aspect that the film simply wasn't interested in. And the pure testosterone environment really aids in heightening the level of hysteria in the group, the maleness of it all, with guns and flamethrowers and bombs and chest pounding. There was something unique about this very masculine energy being mixed with all the bleakness and paranoia. Something else that makes The Thing infinitely rewatchable is, no matter how many times I watch it, I never really know who is infected at what point. Carpenter never lays the specifics out, and does a great job of keeping the particulars under wraps. This makes the film so utterly compelling no matter how many times I've seen it. It keeps audience participation high, and it's one of the few films that I never get bored of watching. As I close out this video, I want to put to rest a question that surrounds the much-debated ending, where MacReady and Childs, the two surviving members of the group, are stuck outside in the freezing cold, and MacReady, who is clearly human, wondering whether or not Childs is infected. Well, Childs is absolutely infected, for two reasons. One, it's keeping in line with the film's bleak and nihilistic tone. Childs is infected, will likely assimilate MacReady, they both freeze to death, and when the rescue team finds them, they will be carted back to civilization and start an infection snowball that eventually consumes all of humanity. It's the only ending that makes sense considering all we've seen and the tone that's been presented. Second, it comes down to deductive reasoning. Childs said he thought he saw Blair outside the camp and went out after him. Now this holds up and makes sense, but it doesn't explain why Childs was missing for so long. A lot happened between the moment he went outside looking for Blair and the destruction of the camp. If Childs was looking for Blair, why didn't he meet up with the group while they were doing their business inside the camp? There was simply way too much missing time for Childs to have been doing anything other than being infected, and that would make the large amount of missing time believable as a survival strategy for the Thing. While MacReady and company are busy taking care of what they think is the remaining threat, the now infected Childs is free to wander off and eventually freeze and preserve himself for future rescue. So yes, Childs was infected. It caps off a movie that is amazingly well constructed and presents a tone that is rarely so effective in horror flicks. The tragedy is that John Carpenter's career was derailed by a film that should have made him even more celebrated. This is the limitation of an industry that relies so heavily on subjective film criticism and box office receipts. But it goes to show that money and critics come and go, while good cinema always stands the test of time. If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting the like and subscribe button, as I'll be posting more content in the future. Thanks for watching.